The poverty line is supposed to tell us who is struggling in America. But what if I told you that the formula that we use was invented in 1963 and has never been updated? An investor named Michael Green did the math on what the poverty line should be using that same formula today. And the number that he landed on explains a lot, like why politicians keep saying that the economy is great while everyone feels like they're drowning. So here's how we got here. Back in 1963, an economist named Molly Orshansky noticed that families spend about a third of their income on food. So she figured if you can calculate like the minimum food budget, just multiply it by 3 and that's your poverty line. It was crude, but it worked. And in 1963, housing was cheap, healthcare was cheap, and childcare basically didn't exist because one parent could always pretty much stay home. But here's the thing. In 2024, food isn't a third of your budget anymore. It's like 6%. Meanwhile, housing is 35 to 45%, healthcare tends to be 15 to 25%, and childcare can be 30 to 40% of your budget. So if you keep Orshansky's original logic, not the number, but the logic, the multiplier wouldn't be 3 anymore, it would be 16, which means that the poverty line for a family of 4 shouldn't be $31,000, which is what it is right now. It would be somewhere between $130,000 to $150,000. Now, there are a lot of economists and journalists that kind of push back on this. They said his math was off or some of his benchmarks were off. But even he said that the number is debatable. He wasn't trying to nail the precise figure, like this is what the poverty line should be. He was just trying to point out that we shouldn't be using a measuring stick that's been broken for 60 years. And here's why this matters, even if you are nowhere near the $31,000 poverty line. It's that threshold to determine who qualifies for Medicaid, who gets food assistance, who gets childcare subsidies. So if you get a raise from like $35,000 to $45,000, congrats, you just lost your healthcare subsidies. Your income went up $10,000, but your expenses went up more than that. So you're actually poorer than you were before, despite doing better on paper. This is why you see families who are making like $80,000 that are genuinely struggling, while the government looks at them and says like, you're fine, you're above the line, but the line measures like nothing. This also explains the disconnect that we keep seeing when politicians will point at like GDP growth or low unemployment and say the economy is doing great. Because technically, by the numbers that they are using, it is. But those numbers are built on a foundation from the wrong math equation. They're measuring whether they can afford groceries, not measuring whether you can afford to participate in the actual economy with healthcare and childcare and housing and all these other things that are required, like phone, internet, all these things that you need just to keep a job. So the official poverty line isn't really measuring who is struggling, it's measuring who is starving. So when you hear that only 11% of Americans live in poverty and you think that can't be right, you're not wrong. The math formula